Welcome to the Creative Playing Podcast Network. Join us as we review our favorite RPGs, collectible card games, MMOs, video games, PC games, and bring up interesting topics and things that we'd like to share with everyone. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, this is Kellie, aka Trixie from Ragnarok and Roll, a Scion to Ragnarok story, and Tilda Wimblewick from D&D Journey of the 5th Edition. First off, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for listening to our varied adventures, as well as for rating us on iTunes and RPGpodcast.com. If you haven't rated us yet, we would greatly appreciate it if you could. And if you're looking for more ways to support our efforts, we are now on Patreon, a great site where you can help us continue making more podcasts, as well as some special surprises for our patrons. If you can, please look us up at www.patreon.com/cppn. Every little bit helps. And again, thank you for listening.
Hey guys, Jim here. Just wanted to say, hey, it's been a while. Sorry about the delay, but we've been enjoying a couple conventions in town. We just got done with Tucson Festival of Books, and the previous weekend, pretty much the whole Creative Playing Podcast crew were over at WWWC5 at the old Tucson studios. So, speaking of WWWC5, I've actually got a panel here that we listened to that was hosted by Madame Askew, David Grasse, Kellie, and Keith Wayne Lackey, who's also known as TikTok. It's the Good Morning Facts, Fashion and Foibles of Victorian Mourning. So hey guys, let me know what you think.
You know, it's absolutely appropriate praise and respect.
You know, it's big mourner. I take pride in my, yes.
Well, your work is amazing. I've never seen any other paid mourners where that's such a music part. It makes you rip out the hay fever, and you have the sigh, and the moan, and the weep at the same time, and you're able to like so delicately down.
If there was a fancy couch one, I could show you.
Oh, I've seen your work from the couch to the funeral. And then if you need to hire a professional mourner, may I recommend this lady to you? Because she is one of the best professional mourners I have really, bar none, that I have ever seen. I'm just going to read it to my those are sadness bubbles. They're filled with grief and sadness and grief. I don't know if I'm supposed to be sitting here, but I am. With the deceased. We're going to be starting shortly with light information that's probably somewhat factual. And there's a great deal of thought and fact and research that we put into it, I think. I mean, there is actual factual information. But your job will be deciding what's real and what's false, like sadness bubbles. No, you don't think the sadness bubbles are real. But I could provide you with fairy tears. And then they could just be so like filled with my fairy sadness. Because I don't fairy. I failed on those.
That's what you didn't believe.
I didn't believe. I believe in my own fairy tower.
You must clap if you believe in fairies.
Did you expect to come to a panel on Mourning and have me talk about fairies? That's better. No, it's not. It's not going to help. I'm a warm-up. To get you into the proper somber mood.
You're doing a good job.
Thank you, because it is very serious. I mean, no lie. People die regularly. And so you have to be prepared. And in the Victorian era, it was like, really regular. I mean, people were just like, oh, I'm walking along, but I wore the wrong dress. Oops, I just died. Wrong die on that one. Whoopsie, I thought it was a good green. Bad green. gnawing at every but of course you've seen it at a few functions.
Once in a while.
Well, I mean, I go to all the best funerals, really. Really, you know, this is a pretty good one, though. I mean, that is a very fine wreath. We match. My dressmaker got the words a bit like the inside word on the funeral decorations before I had to commission my new set of mourning clothes, and he told me, "Oh darling, you cannot go wrong with a little purple to this funeral, you'll be just fine." And you know you want to be dressed just right for funeral, don't you? Yes, absolutely. Now I'm going to keep pricing where are the other mourners? They brought a lot of small coffins too.
Did her children die?
Well, I mean,
No, the dog. The dog.
No, well, the dog did die, sadly, but not at the same time.
You know, I get extra for multiples.
Really? Because this is sort of a multiple event because her companion, her dear friend, strictly a friend. I mean, completely just a friend. I had a good authority that he had every reason in the universe to be in that particular location at that particular time. It got smothered to death at the time of his demise. As friends, these things happen. Oh, hello!
Good thing the girl's on ice, isn't it? Yes, that is where that term comes from.
Oh, yes. Hello. I really don't mind. I decided that to mourn properly, I needed to sit. Because it would be dreadful if I myself died. Can you put two in that?
We've done it before.
Ew. Two in the same coffin. Is that cricket? It's cheeky. It would be cheeky, wouldn't it? Did they have cheeks together? Oh my God! This is 18 and over. Is everyone 18 and over?
I think it would be better if they were 69.
But you know what, darling? It doesn't fit right because the shoulders. You've got obviously after the shoulders at the right and the shoulder face. Oh, people. So shall we introduce ourselves, dear sir?
We should.
Would you like to start? It's so it's all right.
If you don't know Miss Madam Askew, famous TV list, that's what I'm looking for. Tweedling mistress. And
Oh, and a dear friend.
a dear friend of the deceased.
Oh, so dear. I loved her so much.
Yes, she is in the will.
Oh, there was not terrible to ask her. Her tea set was delightful. Yeah, right.
And I am David Grasse. I am your undertaker, also a historian and Old West historian, etc., etc.
And it looks like we'll make sure they're ready for undertaking.
Yes. Please come in.
There's plenty of room. There's so many seats because you know the best funerals are well attended. I mean, I'd say the more the merrier, but it's really the more the more.
More the merrier.
Oh, that's right. It's a very kind yes. And then we have, of course,
Yes.
we have the delightful temperance with us. Kellie and
Day one.
oh yeah, and who's with you, madam?
Oh, he's just a mute.
Oh, just the mute.
Just stand there.
Just send it over.
I mean, you should be working
He's not standing at the door, but
Unfortunately, we pay these men in gin sometimes.
They get
You
long.
get what we pay for.
And who is this delightful gentleman here?
This is TikTok. He is our resurrectionist.
Oh.
His role in the film will be explained a little later.
Oh, he was in practice.
Yes, see, it does happen. Cheek to cheek.
Oh, they are cheek to cheek. Oh my heavens, but there's an infant.
Oh, I just noticed the baby again.
No, that's very, that's like,
very good definitely.
Excellent. And
Some of these you'll see they have less than stellar undertakers.
not like you, Mr. Grasse.
No, not like me.
No, Mr. Grasse is a true professional. And if you're not ready for undertaking, he will make certain that you are.
We can help you along.
Oh, you come in, there's still room, I think, maybe.
Yes, come in, please.
If there are empty seats, point to them. That works entirely well.
Actually, we have a six-pack.
Oh, we have one.
Yes. We do have a photo op at the end.
Please suppose that you know the seats in true Victorian fashion. Because, I mean, those are all. So there is a lot to consider about death in the Victorian era.
Would you like to speak to them about the proper etiquette and fashion?
I would love to, and I think our professional mourner knows a few good things about the etiquette and fashion as well, because as a professional, she must always be at the height of fashion with mourning. And you know, all those little things. Like, well, I mean, we are, you know, not in like a different timeline, darling. We're not historians properly. I mean, like, it's not Doctor Who. We don't have to be like super accurate with our costumes or anything, like they are.
That was a lovely Twitter.
Yeah. What we should probably do is start by feeding these hungry mortals.
Oh my heavens, where are the funeral biscuits? No.
One has a great tradition because, you know, this is basically a small tree. One of the traditions really was. In fact, actually, undertaker is basically your undertaker is basically a party plan.
Very good party then.
And one of the things that was traditional was to make biscuits.
Funeral biscuits.
Funeral biscuits. And those were given before and during the service.
We would want you to fake from hunger while we're mourning.
Yes, that'd be terrible. And then afterwards, after the funeral, the family was obliged to have all the mourners over to their house for a huge, preferably roast beef or roast whatever,
A roast dead creature.
roast dead creature meal after the funeral. And in all their garb and et cetera, et cetera.
Right, and it was very, very important that everything was done just so at this time, because after all, death being such a regular occurrence in Victorian society, one wished to be absolutely as fashionable about it as possible. So you wish, of course, to die very fashionably, if at all possible. I mean, like, tuberculosis was the bad way to go.
It was everywhere.
And it was everywhere. Influenza, if you could just like die in your sleep, really good, less messy. And so they were looking about how to be fashionable about it. And there's so many rules about just how to dress. And of course you have to be au courant, a la mode, and to be dressed in the fashion of the day. Couldn't wear any old black clothes in the closet. No. In fact, you're doing the actual dressmaker would be happy to tell you what bad fortune it was to not buy new mourning clothes.
It was bad luck.
It was bad luck, obviously.
There were entire shops devoted strictly to men and women's mourning gear. Because yes, it was gauche to wear the same thing twice. And that was very common. Child death rates were about 50%
But you
before
know,
they reached 5.
but if your child died under a certain age, you didn't have to mourn very long. You know, all of the maidens said you couldn't possibly be sad for very long. You only had to like mourn and be in black for 3 months, and then you need to get back to more children making.
There were many of these fashion
Oh yeah.
houses that were so considerate in your time of grief, they would come to you very gladly.
Very
We'll bring
gladly.
us a fly.
And they could shoot you out so quickly. I mean, in just 24 hours, you could have the whole wardrobe because they had a warehouse full of crape. And once you were done mourning, you could take your crape and recycle it at the mourning shop. They just take it back, it's sort of like black by the pound.
Yes. We'll change you this for so many yards of this.
Right. And then when you had to go into mourning again, everything had to be brand new and up to date. I mean, favoring yourself for a funeral was completely expected.
Men and women actually, there was actually a difference. You were saying it's about 3 months for a child. Women were expected to stay in mourning at least a year for a wife. We changed it to women, on the other hand, were supposed to stay in mourning for 3 years.
3? I thought it was only 2.
No,
3 years for a husband. That's a lot of change in the clothing. That's just a mourning period.
But then you could move into half mourning.
You could, yes.
So, I mean, once your 2 years were passed, you could sort of gradually, cheer yourself up a bit by moving into shades of lavender and grey. Nothing too cutty, because we wouldn't want you to look like you're having fun, after all, while you're mourning. But clearly, men needed to get back to the business of getting remarried.
Yes, and back to business, too.
And that's
Which is why men's mourning ensembles was much less ornate. And you'll notice, actually, I'm wearing a mourning key fob. This was actually for about a year. This is all you need is a man in a black suit. After about the first 6 months, you could go back to your regular brocade vests, and you would still wear this. Just she was a dear woman, after all.
She was worth the fall. Yes, indeed. But for a wife, obviously, you must be so grief-stricken that that delightful gentleman that your family engaged to marry in a contractual agreement, who was like 30 years older than you, had passed away. You must be in mourning for 3 years. Or perhaps you've taken a grand tour away from, like your family, so you didn't have to get married again right away. And you've done your duty, after all. So to speak. Now, but for young people, the rules were often different because it was felt that children were much too delicate to put them entirely in black, after all, being their constitution. So white was also considered a colour of mourning, very purest white, and frequently used in the young, or in debutantes, because you still wanted to get them married off, after all. I mean, they could only be in mourning so long they hadn't even been married yet. No 3 years for that, no. Back they went.
Well, plus, black is expensive, We don't want to destroy her dowry. We can't get rid of her otherwise.
Right, absolutely true. So lavender was all right if you were a debutante. Young people could sometimes wear very muted pastels. Not neon, I don't think they had that then yet. And if they did, it would have been very, fatal. Like green. No, so sad.
There's nothing wrong with a little rustic.
No, just a smidge. It gives your cheeks such a delightful colour. Just gets you right in the fashionable mode for a funeral, doesn't it?
Keeps them pale.
Keeps them pale.
That sort of lost blood. Pre-Renaissance or pre-Raphaelite. Fainting. Yes.
Right, like you had tuberculosis without tuberculosis. Much easier.
Pesky coughing.
Right, no coughing. I mean, you might die, but there'd be much less mess, wouldn't there?
Yes, and
So-
you have that lovely pale complexion.
Right,
So really what starts the whole Victorian era cult of death, which really it became,
Yes.
was Queen Victoria. After her beloved husband Albert passed, she went into mourning, which she never actually came out of. And
so lovely. Did you see the hat she wore? Oh, she had the most amazing range of mourning hats.
amazing photos of her in all her black, and it started out like, oh, well, she's doing this, we should do it. And pretty soon everybody was trying to one up each other in their mourning. In fact, after the funeral, most people died in their homes. And the body would be taken care of. You call the undertaker, and the family would wash and dress the body. The family would wash and dress the body, and then it would be laid out, and then the undertaker would come in and fit it with clothing, do the makeup, and that kind of thing. And most of this was done in the home.
And quickly, too.
And yes, and then the body was usually conveyed to the chapel for the funeral from the home. Now, what was supposed to happen is the coach would pull up, they would load the casket in, and you'd walk solemnly through your neighborhood, so that of course all the neighbors could see how deep your mourning was.
But not the ladies.
No.
The ladies stayed home and made dinner for everyone else.
And, but better yet, you may want to take a detour on the way to the church through a nicer neighborhood so they could see how terrible your mourning was. They often took detours on the way to the church and to the graveyard to show off
Oh, and
how much
even
they
better
spent.
yet, while they were in the fancy neighborhoods, they walked solemnly. But in between, they rode their hearse because their feet were tired.
Everybody would pile on the hearse with the dead people on top of it.
Except the mutes.
Except the mutes.
They had to walk in front with little sticks.
And stand on the corner.
And
Yes,
run
that's kind of the
and be very solemn.
Basically, the job of the muse, who were usually hired by the undertaker, is they would stand outside your doorway with their little mute thing and with their little mute
This stake.
stake and their staff, and their whole job was just to stand there. Now, if it happened to be cold or raining outside, you tip them, usually with a bottle of gin.
As one does.
And of course, they would drink it. And then they might get a little obnoxious and start speaking.
And sometimes you also use it for your wait staff at the feast
Oh, yeah.
that you were preparing indoors, because why not squeeze every ounce of that pound out for your funeral? It's very expensive.
Pound?
I mean,
No!
it's like
Well,
3 shillings.
Well, he's not getting the full pound. The Undertaker's taking about 75% of that. He's getting enough to get another bottle of gin after his work is done.
And indeed, you could sort of price your funeral by the number of horses you wish to pull the body. And that came with a few different perks.
Yes, for about £5, you could get a hearse, glass-sided hearse, which would, of course, magnificently show up the beautiful casket that you had bought for your dear departed. And you could get a driver and one horse. That's for £5. If you went up to about £25, you could get 4 horses. That same carriage, a driver in black, and a footman as well. Plus, you could probably get a couple more just to get a few extra shillings, a few extra pounds. Basically, the only objective and the whole object for the undertaker was to see how much he could milk you for in your time of grief. And because people were so worried about keeping up with the Joneses or the Windsors, as they were, keeping up with the Windsors, they would pay the money.
That's right. And then sometimes they would in fact beggar themselves in the process of mourning. Especially amongst the middle class, there was a great effort put into looking as bereaved and dignified. As your aristocratic friends weren't really your friends, but you wish they would be your friends because their funeral parties were so much nicer than yours. And so you would really take that extra effort. And you might end up having to, send a few children to the workhouse. But if they died in the workhouse, it wasn't as nearly as tragic as having dear Auntie Gertrude dying.
Yeah, and the guys in the workhouse.
Well, it's a much shorter time of mourning after all. So, yes. And as for the professional mourners, you obviously have a whole work ethic and your special role at funerals amongst people who are waiting for the reading of the will to make sure it has the proper
Atmosphere.
tone.
Because the more grievers you have, the more important you work and the higher status you have.
Oftentimes, however, just as a note, and having read this recently, a gentleman complained that often there would be a line of carriages after the hearse, with the shades drawn because they were all actually empty. Nobody went to the funeral. They just sent their driver in their hearse or their carriage, so they didn't actually have to go and deal with these people.
And it's much less expensive than buying the actual ensemble for the day of the funeral. You only have to worry about normal mourning clothes.
And once you got to the cemetery, the women were not allowed to watch the burial. Only they would go up to about the church gates and then they would leave. The men were allowed to go in and watch the interment. Then, once the interment happened, the men were expected to leave. That's where old TikTok comes in here. Who usually works for the undertaker?
That's pretty good.
Pretty good.
Business is good.
Business is good. Back then, medical schools could not use cadavers. It wasn't until
1832.
Yes, and they were allowed to use people from
It was prisons, workhouses, and asylums.
who had died in these places as cadavers for medical experiments. So,
Big business in, executions, I believe.
executions as well. So they could actually get the body, medical schools could get the bodies that way, but that still wasn't a lot of bodies. So you would have TikTok here. The undertaker would contract with him, usually for a small percentage, and with the men from the medical school, to disinter your loved one, or resurrect them, as it were. And they would, after they pulled you out of the ground, they'd come and open the coffin, take all those little mementos you left inside, pop out any of the gold teeth with a hammer.
You didn't eat anymore, did you?
We were an unsightly bunch.
And then deliver what's left to medical school. Fill the coffin with rocks, drop it back to the ground, nobody's any wiser. They did try to dissuade this practice by putting bars over recently interred people, big strapping iron bars.
This also worked to keep the undead from coming up as well.
Which is definitely a concern as well.
But who installed the bars? Was it the Undertaker?
Yes, of course. So, guess what? We got a key.
So there does seem to be a bit of a hole in that logic, doesn't there?
Yes, there was a great fear of that because then people would be buried alive. A lot of times, science wasn't what it is today. People may slip into a coma, shallow breathing, looks like they're dead, and they would actually interpret. They have actually, and this is for the pastor.
Did my mattress still?
Yes. It did everywhere. All those tears. But they're so salty and good.
So yes, they would disinter them. They have disinterred caskets from that time period where they opened the five scratch marks of some kind of probably out. So they have these ingenious contraptions such as the bell.
Saved by the Bell.
Saved by the Bell, which you've probably heard that phrase before. No, it doesn't come from a horrible TV sitcom.
The school actually refers to that.
Yes, they would actually put a bell above the grave, and there would be a string running down into the casket. So if your loved one did happen to awaken, on the bell, and hopefully there'd be somebody besides TikTok there to hear it.
If it was.
Sometimes be like sleeping vigil, but sometimes there was a little bit of a vigil paid to the corpse, the beloved person in the casket.
It was, yes. And actually, cemeteries back then, at first they started out in the early 1800s, they had the churchyards. Very quickly, especially with population expansion, the churchyards became overfull. And so the English started looking at the French Père Lachaise cemetery as a good idea, a big park cemetery. And so they invested in land, and that's how you get Highgate Cemetery, and also Greenwood Cemetery in New York City. These were just big plots of land, and people would build these great mausoleums and monuments and this statue of beautiful marbled angels. And people would go there on the weekends to visit their dead and picnic and stroll through the parade. It's like one of the places to be seen, even if you weren't in mourning. It was a really wonderful place.
And then you might actually have an opportunity to hear somebody's bell tinkling too. You never know.
Right in the middle of your picnic.
People bring shovels with their picnics just in case of that
I
happening.
don't think so.
But if you go to Glasgow, which is a lovely city, and they have very nice tea house there too, but they're the most amazing necropolis on the hill. You can climb and climb and climb and climb and climb with a very sedate pace as you stroll for hours up to the top of the hill to see all of the beautiful large angels
Yeah.
Kind of creepy.
And Greenwood Cemetery, actually, the way it's laid out, if you ever go to New York, you can go see it, and then go over to Central Park. And you realize the layout is exactly the same. They just took the graves out. Central Park is based on Greenwood Cemetery.
But they didn't take the graves out of Central Park.
No, not Central Park.
Well,
not all of them.
Well, all of them. They might be,
Of course, there might be a couple people we do not know about. Jimmy Hoffa may be there.
I'm still trying to figure that one out.
He's either in the Giant Stadium or in Central Park.
Poor Jimmy. Are we sad about that?
No.
Jersey.
Oh, yes.
In New Jersey.
Same with Jersey.
But there are a great many different, aspects of the mourning process once the body had been buried. Not only did you have to dress just so, you had to make sure everything was covered in wraps.
Oh, yeah.
Your pictures, your doorknob.
Yes, you tie crepe to your doorknob. You would cover all the mirrors in the house in black crepe, which must make getting ready really difficult.
You were supposed to have.
Ensemble.
That's what names for.
Oh, that's true.
So
And
what
they were
question?
already in black, so they didn't have to worry, did they? No, they were ready. They were ready to mourn at every occasion.
Every possible chance they could. We made a fortune out of it.
Oh yeah, I bet they did.
Another thing, out as you go further west, this is popular in Victorian England, most of what we're talking about. Of course, East Coast America also ate Victorian England custom and habit. Even though they tried to distance themselves from England, they really picked up those kind of manners. However, as you came a little bit west, you're a little bit more casual about it. You have somebody who, something like this, I don't know. If there's one of them comes up here, you'll see Mr. John Wesley Hardin, his mustache kind of askew with a bullet hole in his head. He was an unfortunate victim of a gunfight in which he had his back turned and shot him in the back of the head.
As one does in the
As
West.
one does in the West. Usually, and this is where you've heard of the Boot Hills, which are also in Tombstone. There's one, I believe, in Deadwood, South Dakota. Tombstone, Kansas.
Dodge
Kansas,
City.
Dodge City.
Yeah, right.
Boot Hills the name comes from the fact that usually the men died with their boots and were buried with their boots on. In fact, they rarely ever got a casket. If they were lucky, they got thrown wound in a sheet and dumped in the grave. Most of these guys were pretty rough. There wasn't a lot of ceremony, there wasn't a lot of money, and there wasn't a lot of wood. So that was how the term boot hill came to be.
And they were missing the fashion makers to tell them how to dress for the experience. So no one was really getting all fussy down for it.
And you will note sometimes, and actually became the term, he died with his boots on. Oftentimes you'll see, and there's a picture of the Dalton brothers in here, and they're laid out with the Winchester across them. You'll notice none of them have their boots on. It was sort of became a habit for them to take the boots off, so it didn't seem they died as violently as they had.
I
It
know,
also ended
being
up usually
barefoot
with
today
TikTok.
is much less violent. Yes. So, but you know, in the fashion, there were all armbands. Oh yes, but I was going to get to me. Armbands are good too. So bubbles. So gentlemen could get away with a number of things, especially if they were from the class or working class. Oh, there he is! I didn't get to that out that.
Actually, I don't think that's just.
Oh,
I think
there.
that is actually Bill Doolin, and he met the same kind of fate. Yes, that is a hole in his head.
Poor Bill. Are we sad about Bill? Was he nice?
Not particularly.
Not particularly.
Didn't
I
really
think
nice
that's
guy.
still-
I like that.
I bet you could cry for even Bill.
I can cry for anyone if you pay me enough.
So, but yes, in the middle class, gentlemen and other mourners would sometimes not be able to afford all of the accoutrement, and as you went further down the economic divide, it was really impossible to replace your entire wardrobe with something new every season, because people died all the time. I mean, every time you turn around, somebody would be arsenic in their food coloring, or they had some green tea, or there'd been a thresher accident, as there often was, or something out when they were quail hunting, or that fox hunting accident with the horses and the falling off and the breaking the neck, or just childbirth. That was very bad. childbirth.
Says 75% of women did not survive childbirth. Or 75, only 75%, sorry.
Oh yeah. Every woman is a oh, my sweet Tessa. The introduction of ether, which Queen Victoria was a great fan of, really assisted in childbirth.
Yeah. Hello.
And well, I mean, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, they were very fond of laudanum.
Opiates were commonly available in any drugstore. You could buy them anywhere. Especially in the form of laudanum, which was a very, very popular drug among women.
Well,
it helps you get through the danger of the hysteria. Unfortunately, sometimes they use it to excess, and you have laudanum overdose.
I mean, all the hysteria is
Yes.
I'm sure that's what the doctor would say.
That's what the doctor
Overdose of hysteria. The laudanum is just fine. Keep giving it to your children. No, really. Thank you. And milk. But, so you would have to sort of tone it down a bit because you couldn't simply replace all of your clothes. And then as the period of mourning progressed from 6 months to, full mourning to 3/4 mourning to half mourning to just a smidgen mourning to, dear heavens, I'm done with mourning. Oh God, Auntie Gertrude died again. So you couldn't do that as a working person or an agricultural person or somebody who was working in a factory and was watching half of the factory floor die in a very safe working condition. So safe.
Yeah. And of course, for rampant spread of disease, we have airborne now to keep us from the common cold. But imagine if your co-workers all get smallpox. Oh, job openings.
And then, the invention of vaccines was revolutionary because we had much less than 75% attendance. I should not love that club. But then you would wear a black armband, as one might see in some, pictures and different documentation from the era. You would just wrap a black armband around saying, oh, I lost somebody, I'm very sad. I have to go to work tomorrow because I'm only allowed off 1 day a week, Sunday. And I only own one set of clothes because I'm poor. So, black armband.
Still in use today?
Still in use today. Very, very effective. Is that right to say that? Very effective. Effective. Oh, very effective. Oh, dear Diana, very effective. How are those pearls?
We'll find out later. I think they're fakes.
Well, I did hear some disturbing rumors about the Grand Duchess. But there were some other accoutrements that people use, like you're wearing some delightful accessories. As a professional mourner, she has to have all of the right things, doesn't she?
Yes, I'm quick like my lacromattery.
Ooh, right. Mine's half mourning.
Yours is a lot more festive than mine.
Very dears.
Lacromatteries were used to catch the tear catchers. People would cry through the funerals, and at very, very high skill events, they would actually pass them out to those who attended the reception. Really spiky ones.
And then once you cried, you stoppered it up, and you could cry into a lacrimatory. And then for some people, the tradition was once the tears dried up, you could start mourning. But this is England. Not sure anything ever dried. Stiff up a bit, that's good, yeah.
We should also, speaking of things of that nature, it's hair jewelry, which is very, very popular. We actually have one of our mademoiselle over here.
Oh, hello, mademoiselle. In fact, all of your mourning needs can probably be covered by this delightful lady. You would have half mourning fairy tear bottles, right?
I do. You guys now have them for display purposes only.
Right.
So, yes, we actually have cars for Mademoiselle. Here runs the Bisbee Ghost Tour. If you happen to get down to Bisbee, go see her. We'll take you through the most haunted Bisbee, one of the most haunted places around. There are a lot of great deaths there. Great.
You should about some of them, haven't you?
Yes, actually, we're currently working on a book about the Bisbee Massacre, which resulted in the deaths of 4 people in Bisbee.
Small massacre.
Small town.
Yeah, but
I mean, just take the
I mean, do you remember when you get from really a death to a slight slaughter to a massacre?
Actually, I think it's because of the fact that the Bisbee Massacre, a bunch of bandits rode into Bisbee in 1887 with the intention of robbing the general store. That time they rode away, they killed 3 men and, oops, a pregnant woman.
Oh, so that's really 5?
That was, well, yeah, really 5. But it was that pregnant woman that actually made it a massacre, because you could kill all the men you want. This was the Old West, who cared? They're replaceable.
They were in short supply.
Yes, especially a woman who was not a working girl. Yes, who was actually a
I'm not
respected
that
member of
kind of
society. Yes, ma'am.
Mademoiselle.
Mademoiselle.
Mademoiselle. Wasn't the... I always considered the massacre part to be what the Bisbee mob did to John Heath.
Yes, actually, yes.
Because
yeah.
that's like the best.
Yeah,
But I don't want to ruin your story, but that's what I always...
yeah, the 5 guys who actually pulled it off got caught within a month of the robbery. And in the meantime, they started looking into this guy who moved into town named John Heath, who was a local saloon owner. And John Heath knew all the gang bandits. He'd ridden into town with them, and they started thinking he might have been involved in it. They later tried him, after they tried the bandits and found them all guilty, they tried John Heath. They found him guilty of 2nd-degree murder. The reason they did this is because they couldn't agree if he was actually guilty or innocent. The jury split in half. 6 to convict, 6 to release. So they convicted him of 2nd-degree murder, knowing that he would appeal it. As you said, Bisbee, next day after his sentence was handed down, a mob from Bisbee came down. They took John Heath out of his cell in a very kind and loving manner and strung him up from a telegraph pole.
Is that where we get home jury?
That wasn't your work though, was it, TikTok? You're strictly
I admit to nothing.
taking people off.
I admit to nothing.
So actually, and there is a grave for John Heath in the Boot Hill Cemetery in Tombstone. He's not really there. His family came and got his body and took him back to Trail, Texas. However, the other 5 outlaws were hanged en masse in Tombstone on March 28th, I believe, in 1884. They dropped them all at the same time. A little 6-foot drop, and they are all 5 buried out in the Victorian Tombstone, Arizona.
Synchronized hanging.
Yeah, yes. They all dance together.
That's terrible. That's horrible.
But we digress.
So back to what happens once people are dead.
Let's
Let's get back to the fashion.
Fashion and hair jewelry. Well, I
Yes.
mean, really. So if you really love someone and they died on you, don't you want to keep something special of theirs? What's more special than keeping some of their hair? And then once you have it, are you going to just keep it in a drawer or like take it out and pet it? I mean, that's a little weird, don't you think? Just to do something much more culturally appropriate, like, you know, crochet with it and like phrase it.
Little statuette.
Make little statuettes. You can explain it. Make a wreath. Make a wall hanging, or just a shadow box of like crocheted hair. That's magic.
There's an excellent episode of Micro's Someone's Gotta Do It that goes to a museum of entire works of hair art. It's somewhere in the Midwest.
Well, there's one delightfully in Louisiana that I have personally toured.
It's breathtaking.
It is breathtaking. If you have hair jewelry, I want to see it.
And actually, we're taking around a shadow box that has watch chains made of human hair, which is another thing. You take the hair of the dead one and the wife would or daughter would turn it into a watch chain to be worn, by the gentleman, which was another Sunday morning. They actually made, as I believe you have a collection of them, they actually made wreaths out of human hair. I mean, it's so intricate. The weaving is just amazing.
And it's usually like families.
Yeah.
So you would like add on to it as your.
Hey, we got some more hair.
Yeah, it's quite, it's much different than just adding a port tradition to your house. But it's still a very delightfully familial activity. Oh, Auntie Josephina died. Do you think we could get a link with her hair? Look really nice.
What are the pictures
I
about?
don't think we usually be kind enough to cut it off from the back so it didn't show when she was laying it out on the pillow.
Very kind. Yeah, well, with the right hairdo, you'll never see the back, right? No one's telling you on how to look, except maybe TikTok.
Nobody died old enough to go bald.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Nobody died old enough to go bald.
Oh, well, I mean, some people go bald quite young.
Depends on your profession.
No,
And you
right?
can sell your hair, so,
That's also,
for wigs and whatnot, so, especially ladies.
Oh yes, Mr. Billy Clanton, the McLaury brothers, who are actually buried in Boot Hill in these fine, beautiful caskets after they were killed in the gunfight at the OK Corral. This is definitely an exception to the rule. Ike Clanton and the McLaury brothers paid a lot of money for this. This, however, is Will Carver. They just threw him in the ground in a sheet.
In his boots?
In his boots.
but these are
Yes, that is a bullet hole in his chest. Not a missing button.
well, he doesn't look peaceful
Yes.
at all, does he?
It looks like that at that time, photography of the dead was very popular.
It actually
And,
was.
and I noticed, actually, that because my mother had taken a picture of a friend of ours, her casket, and our friends were quite disturbed.
Oh yeah. Can you imagine looking at your cell phone
Considered
going,
quite
hey, wait a
gauche
sec.
today.
Yeah, that's not going to happen nowadays. But yes, at the time, often, especially with children, this would be the only photograph. If a child died young, this would be the only photograph they might have of the child. They never got one while the child was alive. Also for older people who never had their picture taken. The post-mortem photography, as it's called now, you'll also notice this girl looks very much alive. But if you look very closely, if you could see this, and you can't unfortunately because her eyes are closed. And the undertakers got very good at this. They would paint eyes on the lids before the photograph was taken to make it look like the person.
And they would put stands to stand them up too.
And yes, and stands actually. Some of them you'll see in here. You'll see one little girl. She's standing very, very still, very straight with her parents. And if you look down at the bottom, you realize she's got a stand holding her up. She's not alive anymore, but she's there with her parents. It's just such a happy family photo. This was another very, very common to lay out children. They'd put them with their dolls. They'd put them in their best, and really try to make them look like they were asleep. But these often were the only pictures they would ever get of the children, and they would be passed down.
Well, death was so common. I mean, it's not that death disappeared today, but death was so regular and occurring.
It very much was, and it was a common part of life. An older person would die in the house. Your sick family member would die in the house. They were not whisked off to the hospital. The doctor came to the house to take care of them. And when it was decided by the doctor that it was too late, the person would not be whisked off to the hospital or hospice. They would stay in the home and die in the home. And then the family would take care of the body. Usually not the immediate family. Usually they would have outside relatives, aunts and uncles come to actually do the processing of the body, washing it, dressing it, that kind of thing. Before the undertaker came in.
Yes. But it was very close to the bosom, as it were, because so many people died so regularly that I think that in the era, not only did you have Victoria's example of very publicly displaying your grief through fashion and jewelry and etiquette, but that, it was much more normalized to have people dropping dead from wearing green dresses.
Yeah. And yes,
This is my favorite. I like to return to that. kind of less gruesome ways to go. It's not like Fossy Jar.
Yes.
What about putting pennies on her eyes?
That was actually slightly older. There's the Dalton boys. Yeah. You'll notice they're all in their stocking feet. Pennies on the eyes was actually an older thing. They would do it. They would usually do it right after the death until rigor mortis set in. And once rigor mortis set in, and they kept it closed for rigor mortis, once rigor mortis was on, the eyes would usually stay closed. It also harkens back to a time when the Egyptians, I believe, that you had to pay to get across the river Styx. Yeah, they still actually into the Victorian era would sometimes sometimes find coins in the mouth of the deceased. They did have a lot of tricks to make people look much more alive. They would actually, besides painting on it, they would sometimes put curved things, and they do this today in mortuaries. They actually have a curved piece that they will flip under the eyelids. So, because the first thing that sinks is the eyes. So they put this curved piece of, back then it was wood, now they use plastic, under the eye to give it more fullness when the person's laid out. And so you'll notice that this is a wonderful family photograph until you see the little girl laying in front. They also took these pictures of pets. So occasionally you'll see one in here.
Oh,
of a dog.
pets. Pet funerals and pet burial. That was becoming quite a thing. And what a scandalous thing it was occasionally. People, as we are today, a pet can be a very close companion. I know my pets are very dear to me. And at the time, theologically, usually bishops of the Anglican Church frowned upon the burying of pets in hallowed ground because they insisted that there were no souls. That was their theological stance at the time. I am not a theologian. I have no idea what the Anglican Church believes today. But there became a great scandal about these society ladies, older gentlemen taking their pets and paying an undertaker to bury them with all of the rites of a full burial, including the crape on the door and the black calling cards and the black ribbed hankies. And there were cases of riots, of people following after the funeral procession for beloved Fluffy and pelting the grievers with, fruit, or getting even more violent than that. It was really terrible. I don't think I can turn that into a joke whatsoever. It kind of appalls me. It's our fault. There's nothing they can do. Showing off.
As you come by the photograph, often the passing of a pet was something that was mourned just as seriously. So, like you said, death was very, very commonplace in Victorian England and into the Edwardian time. And basically, really, the death, what is now it's become a death cult. Victorian time, the death cult was probably only equal to the Egyptians in their reverence for the dead. I mean, it's the only other time in history where it becomes this much of an obsession. It really kind of dies out about World War I because of the mechanized warfare and the number of bodies that were coming back.
Too much death.
It was too much death, and it became prohibitive. You could not buy funeral clothes for all these young men coming back into Victorian England and America and France with just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of warfare. And in a week, and so that pretty much kind of ends the whole Victorian mourning cult.
Much to the displeasure of people such as I mean,
she had to go get a real job.
That cheeky Charles Dickens wasn't there.
Yeah, he wrote some stuff about just killed business.
Oh my heavens, he just really did not like all of this
Charles
fancy
Dickens,
mourning.
No.
He wasn't into the fashion.
Can you believe he just thought it was ridiculously overpriced and a waste of money and time?
He's so
I didn't think that. You do cherish, embrace the morning. By the black.
Buy the and pay your mourners.
I know. we supposed to establish proper status if you don't have a whole slew of us?
Well, I mean, you need at least a half dozen to be properly arrayed in society. Very sad. And he would write against it.
Dickens hated undertakers. You'll notice, especially, most of you have probably seen Christmas Carol. You notice when on the Ghost of Christmas Past, one of the people who comes in at the very end is the undertaker. And he has one of the worst roles in the entire thing as they're tearing down the bed curtains around Ebenezer Scrooge's bed, and they're all, the undertakers, laughing about how much money they're going to make off of this. Dickens did not like undertakers. If you haven't seen it, well, go back and watch it.
Or read it.
Or read it. Yes, you can read it. It is actually a book.
Some people do occasionally engage in reading.
You know, she's really that crap.
Which came first?
Oh, I'll see you another
I think actually the book was based on a movie.
Oh,
Yes, madam.
do you know where the expression be in mourning comes from? Mourning used as the word to describe bereavement.
Actually, I could answer that question in a rather very technical linguistic sense, but I'm going to save you some of the lengthy wording. But it's an old Germanic word that has been in the English language for time unknown since we were, early English and Middle English, and some of the spelling has just changed with time to like approach morning like good morning, hello, it's sun. So it's not fully transaction, but it's one of those words that we don't know exactly why they put those letters together in that order. It just happened. And then it's just morphed throughout the history of the English language. It's stuck with us. So
It seems like a happy word, like good morning.
right, it's one of those words that some of the spelling has changed by a process that occasionally happens with language. That people come along and decide to tell us how words are spelled, especially in the 1800s and the 1700s when they were first coming up with dictionaries and the printing press development. And so they were like, that sounds similar, so I'm just going to kind of spell it similarly. And there are lots of different spellings. So there's no relationship between the time of day and the, time of Greek. They just look like they should be related. They're not. Yeah, I think we could ask questions. Yeah, what?
We should ask questions of them.
Oh, we should ask them questions. Oh, right, yeah. No, I think we should let them ask us questions. Unless, Madam, you are an official mourner. Are we officially grieved enough to move on to being willing to talk to people about our grief?
Mourners don't move on from their grief.
You
They embrace it.
You grieve always, like it's a daily grieving.
It's like you don't think of people as nowadays. It's like just remember the person with you're holding on to just the grief. Stop with the person that life was like.
Right.
It's like I'm grieving. I want everybody to know I'm grieving. Look, I have more grievers.
Life is sad. And it's very well maintained, sad.
Yes, sure.
The fine upstanding gentleman that would procure the bodies for the med schools, is it true that they were referred to as resurrection men? Or is
Yes, actually that would have been TikTok's. It was really an unofficial title, and it was a nice way to write about it in the paper rather than corpse digger-uppers. But yeah, they were called resurrectionists. That term was coined in England in I believe the 1840s.
The word grave robbers, it's not so pretty.
Yeah, grave robbers.
Right, this really is not a very polite way to refer to such outstanding gentlemen to such a fine business sense.
Yes, ma'am.
And going along with this gentleman, in this country today, the only cadavers that medical schools are allowed to use today are people that actually leave in their will that their body is for science. And even if they find, corpses in the desert or something, it is illegal for a medical school to dissect them. So it is important for people that are willing to leave their body to science for a medical school. They generally keep you for 3 years or less. 3 years is the max. And then they send either the body or the ashes back to the family for interment.
Lady Bubbles, how do you know all this?
I went to a cadaver class as part of my massage program.
Wow! How little we knew that learning how to massage people included learning how to cadaver.
See, now guilty.
I believe it is time for us to bid you all adieu.
We thank you for coming. We hope you see your friends.
If you'd like to take a picture,
If you like to take pictures of the chapter, feel free.
Did you like it?
Yeah, it turned out good.
We probably should.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the panel. Just to let you know, we're going to be posting a few more panels over the next 2 weeks or so, just to get us caught up until we can get a chance to get together and game again. And I'd just like to send a shout out to thank you everybody who's supporting us at patreon.com/cppn. We're hoping this summer, to be able to get a whole bunch more gaming content in and get a bunch of games so that we guys can have some different stuff to listen to. Like always, guys, thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Creative Play and Podcast Network, and feel free to enjoy our other shows such as D&D Journey of the 5th Edition and Scion Ragnarok and Roll, a Scion hero to Ragnarok story. Thank you for listening.
Double stack them. It's okay. A hanky.
This is for you.
Oh, for me?
Yes.
Well, you can wipe your nose and stuff.
I'm going to.